everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you guys doing?
We're great. How are you?
Wonderful. Another wonderful day at Arabian Mountain High. Well, today, in our third meeting for the PLC, we're going to talk about how we are implementing math and science. Okay. Just to start off, I want to review our group norms. As a reminder, start on time. Each person will have an opportunity to be heard. Arrive prepared with any additional information that was asked to be provided during this meeting. Make sure that all cell phones are off. No outside business during sessions, so this is not a gripe session. Always share promising practices. And lastly, we're going to end on time. So this is going to be a work meeting where you guys are going to be able to start to collaborate and plan on the integration of the math and the science. So in the last meeting, we looked at, or we made a list of different instructional strategies that you guys are currently using in your classrooms. And if you look at the second page, I have a short list that are on there. And then I'm going to ask for some of you guys, if you're unclear on some of those strategies that maybe someone else listed, if someone can kind of chime in and talk a little bit about what those strategies are. So the list includes number talks, practical lab exercises, virtual labs, gallery walks, math inquiry, learning stations, problem-based learning, Hoya's problem-solving process, and then the 3-read protocol. So does anyone want to share about any one of these instructional strategies?
Okay, I can share about number talks. Number talks is basically a conversation that you have with your students about a math problem. So you would have a problem posted and you would ask your students to pretty much solve it. You would give them an opportunity to solve it, and then you would ask, okay, well, how did you solve it? And they would demonstrate or explain how they solved it, and you have another student, well, do you have something to add to that, or did you solve it another way? You get that math conversation going, and then those students who didn't answer, maybe they see another way that they can solve it and grow from that point.
Okay. So from a science teacher, any of the exercises or instructional activities that you could explain in terms of the labs or virtual labs or something like that? Can you explain what does that look like in a science classroom?
Well, we don't do virtual labs.
Okay.
So all of our labs are done in the classroom. So if that is something that is desirable after the general session, then I guess the science team can discuss further to see if we can incorporate that in the labs that we do.
Okay.
Well, we did like some simulations. Would that be a virtual lab?
I don't know if we
No,
consider it a
yeah,
virtual
virtual
lab,
lab.
but we do use PhET simulations, which
Okay.
some might consider to be.
Okay, because I know in the past they've
I've done a
used.
virtual lab.
Okay, and your virtual lab
It was
that
a
you used.
science-based lab.
Okay, so it was a science-based lab. I think I remember when you did that lab, we talked a little bit about it. It was set up a lot like that, where the students actually was able to do the pH of different substances. So like when we did the household acids and bases, they were able to use the litmus paper. They were able to use different indicators to determine that. Any other from this list that may need further
Some
explaining?
that I don't know, like a gallery walk.
A gallery walk is basically when you post, maybe your students are doing some sort of activity in class and you post their results and you let the kids walk around and they look at what other people have done and then comment on that later. So the first activity is to walk, to do it. Then you put it up and they silently walk around and take notes on what they've seen, and then you come together as a class to discuss it.
And I think what happens is sometimes there are formal names of strategies that are there, but we don't necessarily know the formal name, but we're doing it in our classes anyway. And so this is gonna be a great time for you guys to collaborate on small teams in order to see what you're using and how you can integrate the math and the science content. So what we're gonna do next is to allow you guys to get together, and so that you can brainstorm different strategies that are used in your classroom and seeing how you can integrate the math and the science, vice versa. And in addition to that, what I would like you guys to do, you have a little area at the bottom. If there are any additional strategies that may not be listed, you can definitely add those strategies and talk about how or what plan do you have in terms of the integration. So you guys, a math teacher should get with a science teacher and so forth. Can we go ahead and do that? And you guys can kind of sit in the tables, and what I'm gonna do is once you guys have had your discussion about the integration piece, you guys can then write a summary of how you plan to use those strategies in your classroom on the chart paper that's posted on the walls.
Do we need to go through all of them?
No,
Okay.
you don't need to go through all of them. You can choose one or two and then talk about the ones that you use and how you can integrate them in the math or science class. Okay?
Good.
And the markers are in the middle of the table.
Sure.
I'll move around.
More room over
So,
here.
not really, not very sad out for contemporary
You maybe want to start. You have a little more experience than I.
Well,
And vice versa.
I've
Stats,
used
calc,
most of
So,
Okay.
for me, like Smith said, I don't care what you call it.
So that's
Education has a way
So,
of
yeah.
Oh, okay.
calling this different names. And somebody wants to
So, like, no, it's all.
Yeah, just making sure you're
That used to
about.
happen.
Yeah.
They gave it a name now.
Everything has to
She was my wife.
So, I mean, I
And then I
don't use,
got married.
What do you guys use?
I use Polish problem
We
solving
have to
process.
collaborate on
Of course,
topics.
because it's math.
If she
I'm trying to
uses
get them
something,
to read
she will not
and
answer it.
understand what they're
She
doing.
will say, oh, we're doing this now, how can you all use this?
How you
We're
set
doing
the
something,
equation
I talked to her, and
then solve it. So it doesn't make sense.
She used my
What
chemistry
kinds
examples.
of, what grade do you teach?
I have, talked about that.
So for me,
And you talk
So I
about
would
it.
freak out.
regardless
Because I
of
think
what we
one
call
of the
this,
hard
to
things
improve implementation,
that each grade level is
in my opinion, will
science.
work
Okay.
So,
Math, people, science people, chemistry and physics, get together,
How do I
come up with what we teach. We already know that physics has it, chemistry has
You know what I'm
it.
saying? So
We just need to
that
give
is
it to
where
you.
You
And the other
can
thing
see
we
I
would
would
do
say,
is,
okay.
because our standards are so
I can use
hard,
these.
your standards are
How are
so
you
hard.
teaching your class? So I'm
The
teaching
topics
it this way.
aren't always
I see
Yeah.
kids that
So
are
we gotta figure a way where if you have something you're gonna be teaching a month from now,
So they're
you're
senior
gonna
class.
be able to cover that now, so when you get to it,
Okay.
they'll have
So
a
there's some
basis
natural
for it.
connections in our business.
Or you can give them something that we haven't covered yet, that when it relates to where, when I start to cover it, I'm giving you problems.
because I mean, that's the issue is that
So you're
most
always
of chemistry
exposed to the
and
idea.
And so,
is when
That-
they're
that was
missing
one
the
way
connection.
of
It's not, I don't really know that it's an issue of
My
strategy. It's more an
suggestion
issue
probably
of the
would be
collaboration,
to say,
yeah.
science people can give the math people, which is not much, believe it or not.
pre-algebra.
What we do is like manipulation of variables.
So,
And
so, I think like,
That
I think the
needs to
science
be
kind of
communicated with,
would be kind of like the foundation
and with the geometry,
the math and
because that's
support,
heavily,
because like the math is the numbers,
intertwined with
science is
everything
the
we do.
application.
And
And
so,
so, I think kind of maybe a good approach is kind of see what,
Trigonometry.
Yeah.
We cover that in our
Tangent.
study. Right.
and so they can see.
how we
Alright.
can kind
And
of
one thing we never do with that
Yeah.
are chemistry
better
related
prepare.
problems.
Yeah,
All our problems
I mean,
are
we,
Just
so
raise
one
up
thing
wide
that I don't
variety,
know, it might be on
general
here, and it might
pairs,
just
walls and
not,
things
it
like
might
that.
not be
Upcoming
fancy.
10th grade.
One thing that I like to do in science is have students give
students that are taking.
And so,
Descriptions of their calculations.
Morally,
A
So what type
general
of-
description,
so
so
what
it's
type
kind of like a number club,
type of stuff
but they don't
was-
build off one another,
So
they're
like they can't
supposed to
solve
describe
equations
their
or-
problem solving strategy out loud.
Yes,
yeah.
things around.
And that's what we, that's what we discussed, because these things are responsibility each
At the same
And is
time.
there a way that we can rework this and put together? Factorization.
This is all we need for science.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So even if
they're just scared
we
of
don't,
fractions.
you don't move it around,
They're about
the
abstract.
math and science
Yeah.
So then in grading, if you have to
one
learn how
can
to
teach,
express.
like,
I did too,
how you
obviously.
warm up, okay?
Actually, one
One, maybe this week you are doing different manipulations, the right manipulation for warm up,
Right.
they're doing sine, we're doing cosine for warm up. That right there will show some
Units
integration.
are,
The
I think
addition of
if there's
reductive
one
part
thing
of
Yeah,
that
it.
very
really
long
more
story,
included
it's
in math.
I know, but I'm saying,
Because they don't get
yeah,
that
we
across
need
the
to do
board.
that,
and it doesn't
that's
matter.
all, that's the topic,
Right.
okay? So
Which
this
means
is our
takes
problem,
because
using all this,
that was
so when I
wrong.
have, when I get to doing a problem, when I get to s squared equals 2 minus
I have to
s
tell you what it is.
squared over 0.2. And I tell students, oh, okay, this means s equals 2 minus s over.
All right.
They're like, they're like,
Yeah.
Believe me, I get it. I get it. The fractions,
yes.
I mean, here's your topics. Number one, formula. Fractions.
Where they should be able to
Number
look
two.
at it based on
Maybe
what
students having.
How to use a calculator. They
They
don't know how to.
Well, we teach them that, we teach them that in science.
Well, they can't
And
even-
that's-
it's
so
not
that
even
needs to
that.
flow over to us.
They can't even
And
fill
you-
in the
You
problem.
know
They
the
don't
problem with that?
understand what
So maybe,
things
Students don't want to buy their calculator.
Yeah.
One other.
maybe
They're
you
going
guys can come up with
down the
like
hallway every
some
time to borrow different calculators. So,
Dumb
every
down
calculator, the functions are
or
different.
more
The brain calculator, they don't know how to
versions
use
of something
it.
like
And that is killing me, I've been
Right.
saying that to parents. Okay, so if you bring your own calculator to class every day, when I'm teaching you love
may not
it,
be going
and you know how to use it. So on the quiz, you know how to use it. But if you run that during quiz exam to Mr. Smith, to go for a calculator, that's the person you see that calculator, you don't know how to use it.
You know, fractions,
So here's the
order
look
of
at this.
operations, and percents.
Understanding variables.
Maybe you
Mhm.
can come up
They don't
with
even
some,
understand what
No,
variable is.
no.
And they
maybe
really
coming
like
up
it
with
this,
some,
because she
you
just
you know,
made
maybe
show
basic class,
like
please keep
how
in
we-
mind, we
all
overlay
that
a
stuff
lot
first.
of good stuff for us.
Right.
Yes.
Chemistry.
So it's the
Which is what
beginning
they're
of your
supposed to
stuff
do
for
in
us.
the
Chemistry,
But, I mean,
career
I have
issue
a
is-
someone package that that's
It's
for
further
every test in my
they're
school.
supposed to now understand what concentration is. They have to understand that in order to understand acids and bases. And a lot of my kids still don't understand that molarity,
Old people
molarity,
have
percent by
it.
mass. They don't
So, yeah,
understand
that
their
makes
different
sense.
units. They don't understand
They do
the, they don't
not
understand what
versions
units
of
are.
Of
Period.
certain
And
concepts
so
that you already do.
that's really the root cause
Exactly.
of all the
Problems that
misunderstanding.
you're
Yeah.
You know that others not.
No.
And I mean, that's not really, that shouldn't be a 10th grade math thing either. It should be like, you should know what miles per hour means, like a long time ago. They don't,
It
yeah.
is the way they keep changing the math. So from the science
Yeah,
perspective.
and tell me what the units of my answer should be for every term.
I'm not gonna say I
They don't
don't care,
understand
that's not the right word.
Part of that, I think, may be a language issue too, not even
What the
a.
state is asking you all to teach, we ought to understand that students only need days when they go to college to be successful. Not all the different things they're putting in math, asking you all to teach. Okay?
72 standard.
All right? But
When they say,
I don't think you should have
oh, they know
72
these
standards.
apply.
Those standards don't help our students. We need the basic algebra and trig. That's what this is.
And
That's
for example, she was talking about
That's very true. Is
And
it's
when did
when
they
I
when,
didn't think
when
to
I've
get
had
into
my
it,
students
I'm
in
like,
lab
why
courses
does
this year,
Too
even when they're doing
Yeah,
it,
so they might
they're
understand
writing,
the
they're
make
writing
it
sentences that don't make
Okay.
sense.
So you
And
got to
that,
somehow
that's
decide
not
to
a
figure
math
out.
issue. They
And
can
this is
understand the
the
math,
root of the
and when
problem.
I
The
say
problem.
describe your
Versus
calculations,
school.
they still
At
have to do it.
school, I'm saying we need to do
Check out
it regardless what the country is telling us.
They'll say, well, I
regardless
just
what the state
subtracted.
is telling
I'm
us.
like, subtract what from what?
Yeah.
But I think
I did these
I
things
think it's not on
repeatedly.
here, but.
I scaffold these things down to a third grade level repeatedly.
But you see, every month teacher need to be doing this.
I agree.
Not that, I'm not saying, no, they don't do this until they get to this one, they don't, no, we know, they don't,
No, we need to get
we need to be integrated as
And
constant.
that's a,
Figure
that's
out.
an issue.
Yeah.
And we're teaching
Exactly.
so much.
Oh, yeah, we
I
have
mean,
it.
Chemistry.
I'm facing the document is there.
But
Then we can.
Yes,
we're pushing all this
reinforce
back down the
and
grade
apply.
level,
middle school.
and they're
Yeah.
not developmentally
Another
ready.
problem they have is this.
Yeah.
You can't read.
They have a problem applying math to science. We can teach them the math,
Mhm.
And so,
but.
When they see it
but
in
when
science,
they
they don't
see it-
what I'm
connect it.
saying is,
When they see it
seeing
in
the
a
stuff in
scientific context,
and seeing how
Yeah.
they don't
they
make
Yeah,
the
they
how
don't
connection.
they're related.
Okay, y'all, we're gonna start pulling in together in about the next 2 or 3 minutes, so if you would, summarize your conversation on the chart paper.
Having
This
the
is what we
teachers
do. This
teach
is
them
what
these
they do.
concepts.
What the
They should be
education
learning to
stuff.
add, subtract, multiply, by. They should be learning what fractions mean. Yeah.
Number charts.
When real easy stuff.
Don't mean nothing to me.
I think that's really
That's
important.
what we do, the number talk.
Yeah.
Start
Yeah.
incremental.
And then we say,
How to
okay,
exercise.
how does this relate
Yeah.
to
Process.
outcomes? How does this relate to experience?
Yeah.
Right.
With the really,
You
really,
get that
really
degree to
easy
that's what we do.
You know, yeah, I understand.
So I don't dwell in that.
So, all of these things, you know, it's just.
I- to me, it's
this is
just-
our
it-
focus.
It shouldn't be the same.
start.
We've pushed it down so
This is our
much
subject
that
area.
now they really
And
need
we
to
can-
have like
we
a at
need a
least
hit
ninth grade
list
level math
from math
understanding,
to
and they
science to
don't.
math.
Yeah.
To
Because
constantly
probably when they learned the
remind
math,
the
they
teachers
weren't taught all that.
of where
I mean,
and we need to know, the other thing, you need to know.
you have to really
what we're
understand
covering.
what,
Yeah, we need
and I
to-
can't tell you how
in other
many
words,
teachers like
We need a
that are
list
teaching
of
fractions in
topics
third grade
we
and
need
don't
to
understand
list of
fractions.
topics So we can
Oh, okay.
constantly.
Yeah, they don't like
And we
it.
have chemistry that they need reinforcement in
And
math.
No, we're not gonna
And
fix
And
that
those
problem.
are the things
Like
in
practical
math
lab
that
exercises.
will
So that's
be
actually the second
what we're
one.
doing in
Yeah, so
chemistry.
practical skills,
Yes.
practical
To
lab
give them
exercises.
exposure to
Make
it
sure.
at this point.
So like us
They
providing
have a better understanding of
organization.
math.
Yeah.
So we just need communication.
Yeah, do something.
Whatever content.
You know, the
Something,
potato, you have the potato,
you
you
know,
know,
something that
Yeah.
talks about.
Yeah.
Conversion.
Yeah.
That is
This
a
is
big
that
thing.
is.
There's,
Yeah.
we were in the lab all week this week, and a lot of the kids are doing their percent error. And they're like,
This is the first
is
unit.
this right?
I wanted to go somewhere where we have teams with engineering.
It's like, we got
The first
36%,
unit
is that, I'm like,
And the
yeah,
math.
is the
you
stuff
did
that
it
this
right,
will-
but shouldn't you have
Chemistry.
gotten
That's what this
36%
school's called
error?
problem-based program.
And,
And then it's
I was like,
problem-based.
I only understand percent error, I was like,
Exact version.
did you do a very good job of your lab? That's what that is
Science,
telling you.
the application and all that.
And we can
That's how
have
they
the
do it.
competition for agriculture.
Yeah.
Are they better kind
And you
of?
can actually see
stuff?
projectile velocity.
It's connected,
Just give
yeah.
us hours, we're gonna write here first, because we're gonna write by the floor.
Yeah, we know. Yeah.
I can talk.
You must be good at writing the years. No, I'm a math teacher, I'm already.
Yeah.
No, so,
Okay.
well, what, 6 months in and my students still think every time I write a G, it's an A.
This is how
It's the collaborative process that needs to be there.
Yeah. Late one.
Wow.
You can put underneath that. C dot algebra arrow. Chemistry.
Okay, what are we supposed to write?
okay.
See, that algebra. What's that?
Coordinate.
Pretty much a summary of your conversation and how answering that question.
Okay, so we just,
We put it down the same
focus,
place.
So the first
focus
thing,
on
practical
units
lab
and,
exercise.
Oh, you're right, a lot better than I did. A lot better. You know, when I was when I was taking my education courses, I was taking proofs. I was writing on the scaffold, professor, said, Mr. Smith.
Chemistry.
Right better, even though the teacher was like, no, you didn't understand.
and the other one is contextualize
always get on
This one work better?
She just opened, see, she would've opened hers and opened mine.
He's
taking his time, you know.
Come look at my board sometimes when I'm finished.
Let's see.
My excuses, I'm not trying to get that.
You and
Yeah.
Just making sure. I'm not very good at spelling. I use computer. Contextualize problems.
Yeah. Because you can implement all of these strategies, but these two,
Yeah. And then
we're
probably
missing vocabulary.
we're gonna make it pink because I think works better.
What's the vocabulary?
Like, the kids don't know what words mean to add, subtract. You teach them.
Yeah, there's a little bit of vocabulary in geometry. Kids wouldn't know that,
Very
though.
central lab.
But they don't know, you know, like when you're asking them to describe something, they can't describe it because they don't know what words mean.
Right.
Addition, subtraction, multiplication,
Oh,
division.
every day, I use math vocabulary and I repeat myself 2 or 3
And
times.
you're the only one that knows
And
it.
then I look and did everybody understand what I said? Because, and they get better at it.
Yeah.
Because I use the math vocabulary. And then I will give them the common explanation in English, but I force them to understand vocabulary because they don't.
They don't.
They don't.
And that's part of the comprehension and understanding.
Inquiry.
Because, I mean, you can use all these strategies, but like I was saying, one thing that we need to work on better, do a better job in math. One, focus on units instead of a single number. And two, contextualizing problems. So they can see how the math is used because.
No, you're right. My first year teaching, I just put numbers on the board.
You just,
And then as I got
you'd be so
along.
you'd be like, oh, yeah, they added.
Yeah, then as I got along, I said, well, there's some sort of units. Now we
Right.
got to the point in my
Do
teaching
you
career where I
get
put
written
units on the
problems
system.
on tests?
Uh-huh.
Like where they describe what they're
Because, well,
supposed to do
one
rather
of the things
solve?
the math department is trying to be more AP-like. So you
They
can have your multiple choice, but you need to have those free response
Do
questions.
they actually like write it in a paragraph?
Yeah, they have to.
Okay, because
the
that's
answer
something
has to
that we
be-
don't do
It
in
has, they have
science.
to write it, because if they're gonna be taking AP courses,
They have to be able to
they have
describe
to be
their.
able to describe and
thought.
write incomplete sentences.
Okay, so I'm gonna add that to the
Yep.
list. Okay. So paragraph, just what is there? a
Yeah, it was
name
about
for
a
it?
minute. Good enough for you guys to finish up your posters and then we'll begin to
Mathematical
report out.
explanations.
Yeah, explanations.
Is a minute good enough?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I need 5.
Oh,
Hey, you gonna rewrite it again, Dr. Oakley?
he's gonna have me rewrite it.
I need to. You still right?
That's because I summarized that.
You want me to post it over here?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe you just could tell us.
Not really, we're gonna do it again.
News or something? Maybe I like our focus. Yeah, like all the communication, really.
Right, because that's what we don't do when we
got it.
first started teaching.
I'll put communicate.
Yeah.
I think we're good.
Star.
Oh.
Alright.
Write this here for me and forget to write it. Provide key emphasis concept based on our
Good teamwork.
summer.
Good job.
Yeah.
That's
We all
the
have the
main
same
thing.
problems.
You can write it at the bottom.
Yeah,
because
okay.
That's fine.
Okay, so the first group can present, I guess we can start with Dr. Oko and
Mr. Smith.
Mr. Smith. And if you wanna
Dr.
come
Oakley,
over here?
You want
Yeah.
to supposed
Okay.
to, Dr. Oakley.
All right.
Dr. Oakley's gonna do the talking. Dr. Oakley likes to talk. So we're gonna let Dr. Oakley talk.
Don't tell me you're shy to talk in front of people.
Yes, I am. I don't know how to do it.
Yes, right.
Well, the main thing we said is when we looked at all the strategies, we know in education they have different terms, different acronyms, but if you really look at the way we teach science and teach math, all of those strategies cross over. They're intertwined, they're integrated. So we did not pick any one strategy because it's something that we're all already doing one way or the other. However, what we see is that there needs to be a collaboration between the math teachers and the science teachers. I noted that we used to do that before. We're doing it. That if science people are doing a particular topic, I'll talk to Mr. Gordon to say, we're doing this, how can you bring this to your student? Even though the standard they're doing in math may be different at that time, Mr. Gordon will take some time, either as a warm-up or something, to do that concept. For example, logarithm. Ms. Ruska used to work with me very, very closely. Okay? If we're doing, going to do PH, she will spend time in her class teaching them logarithm, whether that is where they are at that time or not. Okay? We're doing scientific notation, we all do scientific notation. We're doing significant figure. The math people don't particularly talk about significant figure, but because students are now confused, I have never heard about significant figure, or my math teacher do not hold me responsible for significant figure, but the science people are crying and screaming about this significant figure. What does it mean? At that point, the math teacher, what they will do is take some time to explain what significant figure is in their own way, to say, yeah, we don't use it because many of the things we do are not measured. Okay? They at least have that understanding that you cannot just be writing number without significant figure. So when you go to science, because they do measurement, most of those numbers are measured value. That's why they talk about significant figure. So they get that understanding that the science people are not just crazy talking about significant figure and math people not talking about it. So we think that the point to begin for that integration is to look at what chemistry and physics are doing. Chemistry and physics already have a strong document that puts everything we teach together as part of our summer assignment. So if we can give that, which again the math people who were with me at that time had it, if we can give this document to the math people so they see the type of relationship, equations, everything we use, then they'll be able to help us with manipulation of variables, which is what we do in science, chemistry or physics. It's a lot of manipulation of variable, which may involve trig functions in physics, okay? Logarithm, like as I said, factoring. Students don't know how to factor, okay? And then use of square root. Even when I write 2 minus a quantity 1/2, what is that? They don't know. They're used to seeing that in elementary school. Now when you say 1 raised to the power 1/2, they don't know that means square root. So this is how the science people pretty much will say it, but the math people are concerned about fractions, so that's the basic thing they're doing. Use of calculators, which cross over. I told Mr. Smith that we spend a lot of time teaching our students how to use fraction. And if the math and science people can, again, sing the same tune, that is, require students to have their own calculator and bring their own calculator to class, then students will begin to know how to use their calculator. The problem now is they go down the hall, borrow calculator when we have quiz. Next class period, they'll go down the East Hall to borrow another calculator. Next time they go downstairs, borrow another calculator. So they're using different calculator only when they have quiz and exam. That's the first time they send that calculator. They don't know how to use it. But if it is their calculator they bring to class every day, when we're teaching logarithm, which we do show them how to do, and they know how to do it on their calculator, when they come to quiz and test, they know how to use the same calculator. So we all need to be singing the same tune. He also talked about understanding variable. They don't even know what variable mean. They think math, they're always doing X, Y. They don't know that to us in science, or when they go to science, that those are the variables we talk about. When we say PV equals nRT. In math, they didn't use P, they probably use S and Y. So that's where we see where we need to emphasize. Exponent, which we do a lot, scientific notation, And if we can, the whole thing is, if we can, as a school, it doesn't matter what the county is teaching, it doesn't matter what the state is teaching. We're not saying we don't believe them or we're not going to do what they ask us to do. But if we do all these things, regardless the standard the state hands us, we're going to be doing the standard the state asks us to do. And our school will actually be better off because we're focusing on these things. So we need to decide as a school, what do we really want to do? How do we want to do it? That way we need the math and science people to come together. It's too separate right now, and that's what we see as a problem.
All right, next group.
All right, thanks. I guess this is the pointer. All right, so here our ILA plan. All right, we're going to focus on kind of the movement or the progression from coordinate algebra to chemistry. You know, because I know some of us, we discuss, like, in chemistry, we see a lot of, there's a correlation between poor performance in pre-algebra, actually, not just coordinate algebra, but in pre-algebra. There's a strong correlation between the performance in pre-algebra and the performance in chemistry. And so we first started our conversation just kind of asking about, okay, well, what sort of topics, you know, kind of mathematical topics do we see kids struggling with when they get to chemistry? And the ones that came up were unit conversion, multiplying, adding, subtracting, whatever, fractions, just, you know, that's the F word, right? Fraction, that's the cuss word here, right? Order of operations and percentages. But for coordinate algebra, that's all unit 1, right? That's all stuff that they would have seen in pre-algebra, so I'm like, wow, that really makes sense. It's the pre-algebra stuff that is really messing up the chemistry people. And it's also like messing up the rest of the algebra year, because like as an algebra teacher, I almost kind of assume that there's certain baseline of knowledge that our kids have, and when they don't have it, then it kind of, you know, throws the plan off. But nevertheless, seeing as how those are some of the things that we need to work on. The first, we focus on practical lab, inquiry, and then the third one, which wasn't listed, was just vocab. Okay. And that's something that Dr. Oko mentioned. You know, just kind of do some of the same stuff, but we term it differently. So just kind of bring some unity there. So practical lab, chemistry department will provide the math department with a lab scenario and simple calculation sheet. All right, similar to what he said, kind of provide the math department with a document. So it's cool, we see some consistency. But we want to include on there conversions of units, right? Fractions, order of operations, and percents. So that's stuff I'm going to teach anyway, but kind of teach it through the lens of, you know, or at least maybe not the whole year, but, you know, through the lens of stuff that do science, stuff they're going to see. But not just teaching it through the lens of science with like the word problems, but actually giving them maybe a real dumbed down version or watered down version of an actual lab that they might see in chemistry. And so, one, even though the content might not be quite as difficult or as involved, they would have experienced this type of hands-on work. In a math class where, so I think it's mutually beneficial to science. They've seen it before. In math, they can kind of, you know, contextualize what we're talking about a little bit better. So, I mean, real watered down to the point where I wouldn't need to ask Ms. Benitez for help. Just, okay, here, this is the lab we do. Here's maybe an example of how you can do it, you know, week 2 in your algebra class. All right, you know, tackling these issues because those are the biggest problem areas for chemistry. Second thing, vocabulary. I don't need to really talk about that. Dr. Oka already did. We do a lot of the same stuff, but the math standards phrase it one way. All right, the science standards phrase it another way, but it's the same skills. And so if we can kind of see, all right, well, we may call them exponents. What do you call them? All right, and then maybe kind of, unify it that way, so they're not kind of, as caught off guard. A lot of our kids know stuff, but they don't realize they know it because how it was presented, how it's phrased, and it's just like, no, you have this skill. Oh yeah, that's just like, yes, exactly, that's what it's
Are
like.
they
All
able
right.
to say like PIM does, but they don't know
They don't know what it
how to
means.
apply?
Right.
So,
They may say PIM does, but I may see order of operations, they say, huh?
yeah.
And so, things like that. And then the last thing, inquiry. One thing that we can both start doing is kind of really starting to model, again, kind of similar inquiry practices day one. When the content is really easy, start incorporating the scientific stuff in the math class earlier. Because we really don't get into the science, at least in the past, until we start really talking about like literal equations, when we start talking about formulas and things like that, and half-life if we're talking about exponential growth or decay. Well, I can start talking about chemistry and stuff like that just on fractions somehow, all right? A little guidance on how I can do that would be helpful. And so this, when we talk about the inquiry, really start to model, not every day, but kind of incorporate a lot of those scientific kind of scenarios and inquiry practices early on, day one, so they're accustomed to that process. So then when the content gets harder, they don't shut down on it. So start highly scaffolded and then slowly decrease instructional or instruction/directions as we progress throughout the year. But we start on the easy stuff. I mean, even on the 2+2, if we can figure out a way to kind of make them,
No, it's good.
No? Good? Okay.
kind of go through that. I think, end of the algebra year, they'd be a lot better off. And then when they get to chemistry, they're used to that process. And so they can focus on learning the chemistry and not, shutting down, right? Because they're scared of, they don't know the process of doing the work.
Thank you.
Very well.
And then our last group?
These are the blue group.
Blue group. Oh, we pretty much we are wearing blue. Okay, so we had a lot of similar items to the other two groups, and I'm going to start at the bottom of our list because those are the kind of, I don't know, I think it works better that way. So everyone else has already said it, but it's important that there's communication across departments because none of this is going to happen if no one talks about it. There's plenty of ways to talk about fractions in terms of chemistry. We don't hit stoichiometry till second semester, but that would be the unit where most fractions come in, and so the need becomes very clear as soon as we hit that unit. And so if we had a little bit of planning up front, we could plan for that. You could be talking about how in a recipe we use fractions in a recipe in that context, and chemistry is really just cooking, but in science with different chemicals. And so instead of us having to introduce it in that way, we could just move straight into chemical chemistry rather than talking about hamburgers in our class.
Yeah.
And so that would be helpful for us, just as one example. The other thing that I don't think anyone specifically said, but we've gotten close to it, is that these written and verbal mathematical explanations that the kids can't do, the reason they don't care about it is because we don't specifically assess it. We don't make them write out how you would do a math problem in chemistry. We want them to just be able to do the calculation, which is our end goal, but if we're going to have them really understand it, perhaps we need to be better and more consistent about assessing them in that way. Rather than just saying, find the answer, show your work. We don't even care about the answer if you can explain how to do the problem. And so maybe we need to be a little bit more explicit in doing that consistently and assessing students on that metric. Because they really don't care unless they're going to be tested on it, to be honest. And then kind of moving up the list, if we can contextualize problems, that provides a medium for our students to have to explain their thought process.
It's okay, and when we start looking at, even from the administrative perspective, when I go into classrooms, one of the things that I'm looking for is that integration. So when I go into Mr. Golden's classroom and I hear him talking about half-life, I'm like, great, this is what we need, because Then when they hear Half-Life again in a chemistry classroom, it is not the first time. And so you're addressing it in a different subject, but at the same time, they should be seeing the connection between
Right,
the
see,
two.
they're not seeing it, see, if it's taught at the same time, then you see it like
See it.
that, and that's what we need, like the math, they have to come off this strict, you must follow this path.
Yeah.
You can teach math at any point in time, it doesn't have to follow that path, because the kids don't see the connection.
And they have to learn, and that's the thing that moving forward, when I come into classrooms, both the science and the chemistry classroom, I would like to see that connection. So what we're gonna do moving forward, we'll have other meetings, and then when we have these meetings, probably monthly meetings, like either, and I would like to see it done during a time where, whether it's department meetings, or if there's a time where we can pull you guys together on this common planning, to where you guys can kind of have that conversation and talk about, okay, this is what I'm seeing in my class. This is what I'm teaching. This is the math concepts that are covered here. This is what I need you as the math teacher to ensure that you're going over so that they're able to connect it. There is a lab series. It's called Argument Driven Inquiry. And one of the things that I did do is I did make a push for us to purchase that for the science department. However, even though I push for the science department, my goal is to have you guys to now work with the math department to now look at that science piece and talk about what math can be pulled, because we talked about the communication. How can I communicate my results if I don't know the vocabulary? How can I talk about it from a standpoint of, oh, I'm understanding the concept of stoichiometry because I'm looking at the different ratios, but if I don't know what to call it, then how can I communicate that? So that's pretty much the next steps, and I will be working to get you guys together again so that we can discuss how to do the implementation to where it's a smooth process, and that the students are actually seeing the connections and making the appropriate connections so that it will increase learning for all. But I thank you again for participating in this PLC today. We got some great ideas. I'm going to actually put this all together, and I'm going to send out an email to you guys in regards to what we've talked about today and how we can move forward in the implementation process. So again, thank you.